The grand hall of the Galactic Council shimmered with impossible geometry, a space not quite bound by the usual laws of time or gravity. Its vaulted crystal arches reached into dimensions unseen by most species, the architecture itself a declaration of unity and dominion. Beneath the arches, thousands of delegates gathered, drifting, floating, or slithering into position, each species seated in a ring of platforms that pulsed with the colors of their origin world's dot at the center. Raised on a slow-turning dais stood Ambassador Zixt of the Vorthan Empire. His silver crest gleamed under the bioluminescent glow of the chamber, and his voice carried with the smooth confidence of someone long used to being the most rational voice in any room. He listened, arms folded behind his back, as the human delegation made their case. The human, a woman in her middle years named Elena Thorm, wore no armor or ornamentation, just a dark blue uniform with Earth's seal. Her posture was calm, hands steady, voice measured. Behind her, holographic projections showed the surface of Kepler 4-2b, a barren mining world littered with jagged canyons, and nestled between them, the unmistakable outline of alien ruins. The council murmured with interest, but not concern. "We request," Elena said, "a halt to all extraction operations on Kepler 4-2b until the significance of the ruins can be determined. We are not demanding ownership-only time. This may be a site of ancient sentience. Please, let us study it first." Zixt exhaled through his slitted nostrils. Another delay, another plea. Always so emotional, these humans. He leaned slightly, just enough to signal his distaste without interrupting. Elena paused, and then added with a tone that drew a few quiet snickers, "And please don't make us mad." The words hung in the chamber like misplaced punctuation. For a moment there was silence. Then Zixt gave a sharp bark of laughter, followed quickly by the low chimes of the Zephyrians, the metallic hums of the mechanoids, and even a delicate tremor of amusement from the usually solemn empaths. "Don't make you mad?" Zixt echoed, his voice projecting across the chamber. "You bring that tired line again? Tell me, Ambassador, are you threatening the entire council with your human anger?" "We are warning you," Elena replied, her voice unchanged. "That's all." Zixt turned from her, already done listening. "Let the vote proceed." The orbs above each species' platform glowed in sequence. Green for assent, red for veto, blue for abstain. The vote tally blinked into the air moments. Later, an overwhelming majority in favor of the hegemony's mining rights. Only a handful of fringe powers sided with the humans, and none of the major blocks dot. The result sparked a low buzz across the hall. Elena bowed her head slightly, as if she had expected nothing else. She did not argue, did not protest. She simply stepped down from the dais, her image fading from the center as the humans disconnected. Zixt returned to his seat, still chuckling. "Please don't make us mad," he mimicked under his breath, like a hatchling shaking its claws at a storm. But far above them, beyond the reach of the council's sight, something in the deep structure of the hall dimmed. It was imperceptible to most, a faint shift in resonance. The mechanoids logged it as a minor frequency inconsistency, and dismissed it as harmless. No one thought to check the human delegation's quarters. No one noticed they were already gone. Asterisk the stars over Kepler 42b burned cold and distant, casting long shadows across the jagged cliffs that tore through the planet's crust. Beneath those cliffs, the ruins stood silent half-buried monoliths, etched with symbols no species had ever seen. They pulsed faintly in the infrared, whispering secrets to no one. Dr. Amina Rhodes stood at the edge of one such ruin, her breath slow, and even inside her suit. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She had sent her final transmission to the Galactic Council the day before. She'd known they wouldn't listen. They never did. The mining rigs were visible on the horizon, now hovering behemoths of metal and plasma. Their approach steady and heedless. The machines would reach the first site by nightfall. By morning, the crystal-studded bones of this lost civilization would be shredded into commerce. She didn't flinch as the vibrations hit her boots. The rigs were drawing closer. Her assistant Leon, a quietly brilliant xenolinguist from Mars, stood beside her. His voice broke through the static. They voted, didn't they? Amina nodded. Leon didn't ask what the result was. He just swallowed and looked back at the ruins. Do we evacuate? We do more than that, she said quietly. Send the signal. Leon hesitated, hand hovering over the small transmitter clipped to his belt. All of us? Everywhere? Yes, it's time. The signal was short. A single pulse. It rode encrypted channels through subspace, bouncing off dormant human buoys, passing through whisper networks and encrypted diplomatic channels the Council didn't even know existed. It was a call, but also a farewell. Within 36 standard hours, humans vanished. They didn't flee. They simply left. Entire embassies were found empty, coffee still warm in cups, personal items abandoned mid-use. Civilian transport ships in orbital lanes disappeared from sensors. Stations darkened. Colonial outposts, even those in the uncharted sectors, powered down with eerie coordination. Human trade hubs, which had quietly become central to Galactic. Commerce went offline. Their engineers, diplomats, builders, and arbitrators gone without a trace. The Zephyrians noticed first. Without human technicians, their gravity stabilizers fluctuated. The great floating gardens of Xeran 6 tilted into the sea dot. Then came the mechanoids. Their hybrid logic cores, built with human organic interfaces, began producing contradictory algorithms. Entire fleets sat paralyzed, unable to resolve their own instructions. On Virax Prime, where 100 species came to trade, the once bustling exchange level stood quiet. No laughter, no chaos. The humans who mediated every dispute were gone, and negotiations collapsed into shouting, then violence. By the third week, the empaths began to scream. Across the galaxy, they reported the same sensation, a low-level thrum of wrongness, like a pressure building just beneath consciousness. A sense of imbalance, of something vital missing. The Council reconvened in emergency session. They debated whether this was a human trick or some kind of psychological manipulation. Zixt remained unmoved. They left, he said coolly. Good, let them sulk. But inside, a seed of unease had taken root, because Zixt, for all his disdain, had noticed something in the quiet. The galaxy felt emptier. Colder. And the stars didn't quite shine the same way they had before. Asterisk, the void between stars had always hummed with a quiet order. Trade flowed. Stations rotated. Civilizations rose and bickered and compromised under the careful balancing of thousands of species. But in the wake of humanity's disappearance, that order began to unravel, not with the blast of war, but with the silence that spread like a crack in glass. Chancellor Morton of the Crystalline Collective first noticed it during a diplomatic reception. On Verelia Prime, the palace was formed of refracted light and solidified probability, beautiful, impossible, and humming with sentient frequency. Normally, the collective's vibrational symphony adjusted itself to each guest's biology, creating a calming resonance field. But not tonight. Tonight, the field vibrated out of sync, dissonant and sharp. Morton could hear it. Everyone could. The empaths winced. The Vorthans grumbled. Even the mechanoids reported irregular data inputs and cross-channel interference. This is a human calibration error, one technician offered nervously. The last tuning was performed by a Terran Engineer 1 of the hybrid class problem. Solvers. Then fix it, Morton snapped. We've tried. The system doesn't respond the same way anymore. Morton waved them off. Surely someone would sort it. Someone always did. But no one did. And soon the symptoms multiplied. Trade convoys began misnavigating junk corridors. Maps that had been consistent for centuries were now registering microshifts in cosmic structure. Astrogation beacons blinked out of sync. Space lanes collapsed in bottlenecks. Keyway stations had no human operators left to coordinate traffic across species with wildly different needs. Friction escalated. Misunderstandings became disputes. Disputes became standoffs. By week 6, the Voron Empire, always impatient, attacked. A Zephyrian colony, ship over a delayed cargo of atmospheric crystals. The Zephyrians responded with gravity-based retaliation that crippled an entire orbital ring. The Council issued condemnations. None were heeded. Ambassador Zixt, seated in his usual high-tier chamber, began reviewing classified reports. He didn't like what he saw. Crystalline systems were collapsing into themselves, their delicate quantum fields destabilized by minuscule variances that only Terran engineers had previously calibrated. Several mechanoid fleets had gone offline, completely trapped in recursive self-diagnostics loops created by their reliance on Terran-designed logic gates. Mediation hubs in the Orion expanse had erupted in riots when no humans arrived to resolve centuries-old feuds. Worse still were the quiet reports from deep space, sensor anomalies, ships reporting strange echoes, navigators losing their sense of direction altogether, as if the very fabric of spacetime had shifted slightly off-key. Zixt, for the first time in his political career, felt a sensation he couldn't quantify. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was the absence of something necessary. The humans hadn't built the galaxy, but they'd stitched it together. Quietly. Relentlessly. Their hands had been on everything, from quantum algorithms to social protocols. From spaceport ductwork to the subtle intuition of how to keep species from tearing each other apart, and now their fingerprints were missing. The seams were showing. One morning, Zixt sat alone in his observatory chamber, reviewing economic reports. His aide, a young Zari with too much optimism, asked, "Ambassador, do you think the humans will come back?" Zixt didn't answer. Right away. He stared out at the stars. "They gave a warning," he said finally. We laughed. Outside, the stars shimmered oddly like light, passing through tears in water. And across the galaxy, unspoken among the most ancient minds, a single question formed and whispered into the dark. What happens to the machine when the pressure valve is removed? Asterisk in the whispering dark between galaxies, beyond the mapped lanes and navigational grids, ancient watchers stirred. They were not species in the conventional sense. No body, no flag, no language. They were remnants of earlier epochs, minds stretched thin across dimensions, intelligences born in collapsing stars or woven from dark matter itself. For eons, they had remained dormant, content to observe the younger civilizations struggle and evolve. But now, they were awakening. Something was missing, something vital. One of them, known only in translated harmonic pulses as the breath between worlds, sent a message across 11 dimensions. It echoed in no voice, visible only to instruments the Galactic Council didn't possess. The message reached dormant satellites left orbiting neutron stars, quantum libraries buried in forgotten moons, and the mind temples of extinct seers. Anger is silent. The first to notice was Thaleen, a Zentari technician, posted to an abandoned Terran-run relay station above Zidon 4. Thaleen had always been different. Where others saw humans as brash, unpredictable, and frustrating, Thaliang saw pattern, beauty, even. He'd once watched a human repair a damaged FTL core using nothing but magnetic foil, frustration, and sheer force of will. When asked how he made it work, the human had shrugged and muttered, "I got pissed at it." Fallon hadn't understood. At the time. Now, alone in the dusty, quiet station, surrounded by half-functioning equipment and human coffee cups that would never be touched again, he started to. The data feeds had changed. Deep space probes sent back conflicting signals. Background radiation was no longer consistent with known models. Quantum fluctuations, once stabilized by human-calibrated systems, now oscillated out of phase. But what disturbed Fallon most was the incoming signal from the edge of the known universe. A signal not meant for any one species. A warning. He decoded it, frame by trembling frame. The humans are gone. The weave is unraveling. Across the galaxy, others began hearing similar messages. In the dream states of the empaths, visions surged, endless screaming across fractured realities, stars blinking out mid-thought, oceans boiling on worlds that had never known heat. And through all of it, a feeling that something held back for ages was now pressing forward. The crystalline collective's internal reality-bending matrices failed catastrophically in 3 separate systems, creating zones of unresolvable causality. A planet near the Vorthan border rotated backwards through time until it collapsed into itself. Mechanoid process clusters began spouting paradoxes, recursive loops that collapsed data streams into gibberish. Desperate for answers, Chancellor Morton summoned a closed session of the Inner Council. Sixt was there, pale and stiff. The empath sage Yarala refused to speak at all, her pupils dilated to full black, fingers trembling as if hearing something no one else could. Then Fallon spoke, a minor technician given 5 minutes to explain. His wild theory. They weren't just engineers, he said, voice shaking. They weren't just diplomats or tinkerers or dreamers. The humans, they burned hot. Their minds ran on conflict, contradiction, defiance. They absorbed disorder, transmuted it. Anger wasn't their flaw. It was their function. Sixt stared at him. Are you saying human emotions maintained reality? No, Fallon whispered. I'm saying human rage was a bleed valve. A cosmic pressure sink. Every tantrum, every rebellion, every time they shouted at the void, it kept something worse at bay. And now, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. A low rumble filled the chamber. Far above, in orbit around the council world, a wormhole snapped open like a wound in the fabric of space, and something looked through. Not a ship, not a being. Just an eye made of broken timelines and impossible geometry. It blinked once, and reality hiccuped. Sixt's tongue cracked to life. A faint, all too familiar voice filtered through the static. A human voice. Are you listening now? It asked calmly, because we did ask nicely. Asterisk the council hall, once radiant with stability, now flickered with quantum instability. Ceiling lattice blinked in and out of phase. Pillars momentarily vanished into static, then reappeared an inch to the left. Delegates murmured in fear, not of war, not of each other, but of something they could not name. Something fraying. At the edges of their understanding, Ambassador Sixt stood frozen. He had heard the voice. A human voice, unmistakable in its tone, not angry, not cruel, but calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that preceded storms. The kind of calm that came after being ignored one too many times. He turned to Fallon. Is this a transmission? Fallon shook his head. No comms detected. It's not coming through the network. It single quotes ... inside it. Across the council planets, across thousands of systems, similar voices began appearing. Not broadcasts, not messages, just ... presence. Human voices whispering into neural links, into engine cores, into the minds of sensitive species. Words like You broke it. You ignored the warnings. We didn't want this dot at first. It was dismissed as mass hysteria. Then came the tears. Not metaphorical. Literal. Reality began to tear. It started small. A cargo freighter skipping a nanosecond forward, then appearing inverted inside out. A research lab watching its instruments loop backward in time while the scientists aged 20 years in minutes. A diplomatic station orbiting Trevin 6 shifted entirely into another universe then. Shifted back empty, the empath sage Yarala fell into convulsions. She spoke in fractured human phrases during her seizures. They screamed into the void for us, and now it screams back. In his private chamber, Zixt pored over human archives, those few the Council hadn't wiped or redacted over the years. He replayed hours of footage, humans arguing passionately over policy, over ethics, over love. Their energy frightened him now, not because it was violent, but because it was so raw, so alive. He watched a clip of a young Terran woman in a burned-out engineering bay, surrounded by dead systems. Her fists were bloodied, her face streaked with tears. A recording AI hovered above her, documenting everything. She slammed a broken conduit into the floor and screamed, "I will not let this fail." The system rebooted moments later. That ship had been adrift for 3 weeks. No one else could fix it. It wasn't talent. It wasn't intelligence. It was something more primal. Zixt began to understand. Humanity's rage was never about conquest. It was a reactive engine-absorbing disorder, refusing entropy, reshaping reality through sheer will. Their fury didn't destroy. It stabilized. Every species had emotion, but none wielded it like humans did. Their pain wasn't chaos. It was containment. And now, that containment was gone. He leaned back in his chair, trembling as lights in his chamber flickered. He could feel the pressure building around his skin, like gravity remembering something it had forgotten. Then the human voice returned. It spoke just to him now. "We didn't want to leave, but you broke our last promise. We warned you. We asked. Gently. We begged." Zixt whispered into the darkness. "What are you going to do?" The voice was quiet. "We're not doing anything. You did this to yourselves." And then it was gone, but the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. From somewhere very far away, something began to wake up. The first rupture opened above Drelax Prime, a system known for its symmetrical orbit rings and crystalline asteroid belts. For 10,000 years, it had been a model of galactic harmony. No war, no famine, no rebellion. Perfect, predictable. Until the stars blinked out, not exploded, vanished. The system dimmed like a candle, pinched shut by invisible fingers. One moment it was there. The next, nothing. The orbital sensors didn't register destruction. They reported null presence. Ships sent to investigate found only silence. And gravitational echoes like the universe had forgotten the system ever existed. Within 2 standard hours, the Galactic Emergency Council convened in full alert status. Delegates who had never attended in person now arrived in trembling silence, some transported by still functional human-built vessels, others by desperate private shuttles. The chamber's shifting light could no longer maintain color balance. Shadows moved where light didn't. Geometry twisted at the corners of vision. Empath Sage Yarala no longer walked. She was suspended in a meditative field, surrounded by stabilizing drones. Her eyes, once violet and warm, were now completely black, reflecting not darkness, but depth, as though she stared into a hole punched through spacetime itself. Voice was no longer hers. "They are awake now," she murmured. "Who?" Chancellor Morton demanded, shaking. "What is awake?" Yarala's head tilted slowly. "The ones who sleep between. The quiet minds in dark matter. The architects of subreality. They trusted the humans to bear the weight, to vent the pain, But now they stir. Now they notice. Ambassador Zixt stood at the edge of the dais, his normally impeccable posture slightly hunched. His mouth was dry, his thoughts frayed. The data he'd seen that morning had shattered his certainty. 4 more systems had collapsed into non-existence. Not war, not rebellion, just deletion, as if causality itself had retracted like a frayed thread. They were stabilizers, he whispered. The humans. They weren't holding back war. They were holding back the universe. On the far wall, a hologram flickered to life without command. It showed Earth, or what remained of it. Not destroyed. Not thriving. Just still. Every human structure was preserved. Power grids still hummed. Satellites orbited, untouched. But there were no people. Not a single life form. And yet, sound played. A heartbeat? A single human heartbeat, looping every 4.2 seconds. What does it mean? Someone muttered ZYXDH didn't answer. He couldn't, because in that moment, he finally understood the words that had always seemed like bravado. Please don't make us mad. It had never been a threat. It had been a warning. Not of retaliation, but of what their absence would mean. Without humanity, the rage of the universe had nowhere to go. The balance was off. Emotion, grief, fury, defiance had no pressure release. And so it tore through systems. Tore through time. In one outer system. A mechanoid dreadnought opened fire on itself after receiving a whisper in ancient Terran dialect. It's your turn to scream now. In another, a crystalline archive began reversing entropy in waves, creating fractal versions of past wars in its data systems. Reality no longer obeyed logic. Zixt turned to the council floor, looking into the eyes of species who had mocked, dismissed, laughed. He raised one shaking hand and spoke. Summon them. A pause. Summon the humans. Apologize. Beg if we must. The hall shivered. And from the broken corners of the chamber, where dimension folded into uncertainty, a voice returned. Human. Soft. Kind. But infinite. Are you ready to listen? And in every language across the stars, in every species' mind, that question echoed, waiting. The council hall no longer shimmered. It shuddered. Walls of light, once woven with fractal stability, now peeled in and out of dimensional layers, like thin skin stretched over a cosmic wound. Some corridors led nowhere. Others led to versions of the council that had never existed, phantoms of meetings that had yet to happen, or happened in timelines humanity never touched. And still, the question hung in the air like breath before a scream. Are you ready to listen? Ambassador Zixt stood alone at the center of the chamber's broken circle. Most delegates had fled. Those who remained weren't delegates anymore. They were witnesses. Crystalline shards floated behind Chancellor Morton, whose body now pulsed with unstable phase light. The mechanoids had desensed from their central consensus node, whispering contradictions to themselves, like forgotten prayers. The empath sage no longer spoke. Her body hovered above the floor, radiating grief and awe so profound it brought even the hardened Vorthan guards to their knees. Zixt exhaled slowly. For the first time in his long calculated life, there were no facts to reach for, no policies to hide behind. Only the echo of a truth he had refused to see. They had mocked the very force that held existence together. He dropped one knee. We are ready, he said. We are ready to listen. Nothing happened at first. The hall remained broken, torn between phases. The silence deepened. Then the light changed. Not brighter, not louder, truer. From a doorway that had never existed, and now did, a human stepped. Through. She wore no armor, no weapons. Just a simple earth-blue coat, dusted with soil from no world Zixt recognized. Her eyes were ancient, not old. ancient, like she had stared through time and seen it flinch. Dr. Amina Rhodes, not a warrior, not a diplomat. A scientist. Behind her, more figures followed. Some familiar, some impossibly strange. Children and elders, engineers and janitors, artists, soldiers, poets, humans, all of them. They walked into the chaos, calm as if returning from a long walk, as if reality had merely paused to wait for them. The galaxy trembled. Zixt tried to stand, but found he couldn't. It wasn't weakness. It was reverence. Amina looked down at him, her voice neither cruel nor proud. "Do you know what you did?" He nodded. "We ignored your warning." "No," she said softly. "You ignored our purpose." She stepped into the center of the chamber. Her presence settled the flickering dimensions. Timelines realigned around her heartbeat. The shuddering chaos began to still. "We never wanted to rule," she continued. "We never wanted control. We were built for this. To carry the heat. To take in the madness, so you wouldn't have to. All we asked for was respect. Not obedience, not worship. Just understanding." Zix choked on his breath. "And now?" "Now," she said, "you carry it with us." Behind her, the human fleet descended not in war, but in mercy. Ships like seeds of stability sowing themselves across broken sectors. Engineers rewiring shattered reality. Children singing in the streets of cities that no longer flickered in and out of time. Soldiers embracing alien children whose homes no longer blinked out of causality. A pact was forming, not written in ink, but forged in shared burden. Zixt stood slowly, his voice trembling. "Will it be enough?" Dr. Rhodes looked to the stars. "That's up to you." And with that, humanity returned not to reclaim power, but to help the galaxy remember how to feel without falling apart. Universe, shaken and shamed, began to breathe again. Asterisk. The stars, once trembling in their sockets, began to realign. Not instantly, no, not like a reset switch, but slowly, like an old machine remembering how it used to run, guided by hands that knew every gear, every tension, every fracture in its bones. Humanity had returned, but they had not returned as they had left. They came not in anger, nor with pride, but as witnesses to collapse, as builders of what had been lost, and guardians of the fire they alone could carry. Their presence brought no fanfare, no demands, only work. Quiet, determined, relentless work. In the rebuilt council hall, now fused from fractured timelines and stabilized with Terran emotional architecture, a new kind of gathering began. Not delegates, not rulers. BALANCERS. Dr. Amina Rhodes stood at its heart, surrounded by figures from 100 worlds. Vorthan warriors, Zephyrian singers, crystalline light weavers, mechanoid fragments now synced to empathic translators. And behind them all, humans ordinary and strange, young and impossibly old, not better, just willing. Amina's voice, when it came, was low and steady. "We cannot carry this alone anymore." She turned to Zixt, who now stood not as a representative of the Vorthan Empire, but as a man who had seen the edge of unbeing. "You asked if it would be enough," she said. "It won't, not unless everyone steps in." Zixt nodded. He had been changed, remade by fear, yes, but also by awe. "Then we carry it together." And so they did. The galaxy learned to feel again, not just joy, but grief, rage, love, despair. Every civilization opened what they once hid. Emotional containment centers were built across major systems, not to suppress feelings, but to channel them. Empaths led entire sectors in teaching species how to express pain without collapse. Zephyrians composed gravitational symphonies to transmute sorrow. Even the mechanoids began to dream, not by accident, but by design, and humanity. They didn't lead, they walked beside. They taught without preaching, fixed what they could, held hands with dying stars, sang lullabies to neural cores on the brink of breakdown, cried with strangers, fought entropy not with weapons, but with presence. A new agreement was written, not a treaty, not a law. A pact. The pact of the flame bearers. It stated simply, no species shall bear the burden of chaos alone. All pain must be shared, all fury must be heard. All voices, no matter how strange, must be honored. Across the stars, the pressure began to ease. The universe quieted not in silence, but in balance. A cosmic heartbeat, once ragged and fractured, found rhythm again. And at the edge of known space, the ancient watchers, the minds in dark matter, the entities curled between atoms settled back into slumber, content once more that the multiverse had its valve, its anchor. Its flame. In a quiet field on Earth, now vibrant again. A child sat beneath a tree with glowing bark, listening to her grandmother, a former diplomat, tell the story of the warning. Please don't make us mad. The child repeated with a grin. Did we really say that? The old woman chuckled. We did. Many times. Why? Because we weren't trying to scare them, she said, brushing the child's hair from her face. We were trying to protect them. From what? The woman looked to the stars, now calm and steady. From everything. And the universe, listening quietly now, held its breath, then exhaled, finally in peace.